My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 34 years old. For most of my life, I believed family was something you protected, even when it hurt. I believed loyalty meant staying quiet, forgiving, making excuses, giving people the benefit of the doubt long after they had stopped deserving it. I was wrong. The moment I finally understood that happened 3 days before New Year's Eve. My father called me that afternoon. At first, I thought he was calling to ask what dessert I was bringing, or whether Mia still wanted to bring her telescope like she did every year. Instead, his voice sounded strangely formal, cold, carefully controlled. "Claire," he said, "maybe it's best if you and Mia stay home this year." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. "What?" he sighed. The way people sigh when they think they're being reasonable. "We're trying to have a different kind of gathering this year." "What does that mean?" There was a pause. Then he said words I will never forget. "Mia can be a little unusual. Unusual. As if my daughter were a problem. As if she were something embarrassing that needed to be managed." I asked him what he meant. His answer only made it worse. He started talking about my younger sister Rachel's daughter, Bella. About Bella's pageant friends. About appearances. About wanting everything to feel polished. Then he finally said it. "Your daughter is a little too weird for this crowd." The word hit harder than I expected. Weird. Not curious. Not brilliant. Not imaginative. Weird. I sat there listening while he described my 8-year-old daughter as if she were some kind of social liability. Mia loved astronomy. She collected insects. She built strange little machines out of broken appliances. She wore safety goggles around the house because she thought every experiment deserved proper equipment. She once spent 3 weeks designing a cardboard elevator for her stuffed animals because she wanted to understand pulleys. That was who she was. And apparently, that was too much. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't ask him how he could say something so cruel about his own granddaughter. I simply said, "All right." Then I hung up. The silence afterward felt enormous. My boyfriend, Daniel Parker, was upstairs wrapping gifts. I could hear the sound of tape pulling from a dispenser. Paper folding. Boxes moving. Normal sounds. But nothing felt normal anymore. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. The more I replayed the conversation, the worse it felt. Because it wasn't just what he said. It was how easily he said it. Like Mia's exclusion was obvious. Like any reasonable person would understand. A few minutes later, Mia came into the room holding a sheet of paper. She was smiling. Her dark curls bounced as she walked. "Mama? Look." She handed me a drawing. A rocket ship? Except halfway through the flight, the rocket unfolded into a giant kite. "I think it could work," she said excitedly. "If we put a spring in the tail and use the right kind of string." I smiled. Because she was wonderful. Because she saw possibilities everywhere. Then, her smile faded slightly. "Are we still going to Grandpa's house?" There it was. The question I had been dreading. I swallowed. "No, sweetheart. Not this year." She looked at me for a moment. I braced myself for tears. For confusion. For hurt. Instead, she nodded. Then she said something that broke my heart. "We can do something else, right?" I smiled. "Yes." A bigger smile spread across her face. "Cool." Then she grabbed her drawing and ran back toward her room, as if losing her grandparents' party wasn't nearly as important as building her next invention. I watched her disappear down the hallway. Then I stood up, walked into the kitchen, opened my contacts list, and started making calls. I started with the people who had always seen Mia for who she really was. Not the version my parents wished she would become. Not the version that looked good in family photos. The real Mia. The brilliant, endlessly curious little girl who could spend 2 hours explaining why Saturn's rings fascinated her and somehow make every minute interesting. I called my Aunt Lily first. The moment I explained what had happened, she went silent. Then she said, "Claire, are you serious?" I wish I wasn't. Her voice hardened immediately. "Tell Mia I'm bringing 3 boxes of old electronics for her to take apart." That was Aunt Lily, always understanding exactly what mattered. Then I called Daniel's cousins, Mia's science club friends, parents who had encouraged her experiments, an old preschool teacher who still sent birthday cards because she once told me Mia's mind was like a garden that never stopped growing. One by one, they all said yes. Not politely, not reluctantly, enthusiastically, as if they had been waiting for an excuse to celebrate a child like Mia. I expected maybe 15 people, 20 if we were lucky. 52 showed up. 52. By the time New Year's Eve arrived, our backyard looked like something from a science festival. Inflatable planets hung from trees. Telescopes pointed toward the winter sky. A fire pit glowed in the center of the yard. There were glowing pathways, atom-shaped cupcakes, science games, obstacle courses, and invention stations. One family friend who worked as a science educator brought reptiles and amphibians for the kids to learn about. Another parent organized hands-on chemistry demonstrations. Someone else built a giant constellation wall. Mia helped design almost everything. The moment the first guests arrived, she transformed. The cautious little girl who sometimes felt different at family gatherings disappeared. In her place stood a confident inventor, proudly showing children how her homemade pulley system worked. I watched her laugh, run, teach, create, and something inside me shifted. For years, I had been trying to make my daughter fit into spaces that were never designed for her. Now I was watching her thrive, in a space built around who she actually was. Late that evening, while dozens of children played around her inventions, Mia ran over and wrapped her arms around me. "Mama? Yeah? This is better." I looked at her. "Better than what?" She grinned. "Everything." Those single words made every phone call worth it. Every decoration. Every expense. Every ounce of heartbreak. When midnight approached, everyone gathered outside. Children waved sparklers. Parents counted down. Mia stood on a small platform beside one of her inventions, looking happier than I had seen her in months. I took a picture. Just one. Mia holding a sparkler. Surrounded by smiling children. Her invention glowing beside her. Later that night, after everyone went home, I posted the photo. Nothing dramatic. Nothing confrontational. Just a simple caption. "Here's to the children who don't fit the mold. You're not weird. You're brilliant. Happy New Year from our little laboratory of joy." I didn't mention my parents. I didn't mention the phone call. I didn't mention being excluded. I simply celebrated my daughter. 10 minutes later, my mother called. I ignored it. Then another call. Then a text. The message read, "So I guess this is how it is now. You replaced us." I stared at the screen. Years ago, that message would have worked. Years ago, I would have panicked. Apologized. Explained. Tried to make everyone happy. Instead, I typed 4 words. "No." I protected her. Then I added, "You rejected her first." I hit send. For a long time, she didn't respond. The next morning, she called again. I let it ring. Then Rachel texted me. She sent a screenshot of my post. Below it, she wrote, "Wow. Real mature, Claire." I actually laughed. Rachel, who once screamed at a restaurant manager because her salad wasn't arranged properly, was suddenly lecturing me about maturity. The hypocrisy was almost impressive. What surprised me wasn't their reaction. It was how predictable it felt. The guilt, the manipulation, the silent pressure, the attempt to make me responsible for their choices. For years, those tactics had worked. This time, they didn't. A few hours later, I received a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My cousin Ethan. He had seen the picture online. What happened? I told him exactly what happened. No exaggeration. No embellishment. Just facts. My father told me my daughter was too weird for New Year's, so I gave her a better New Year's. A few minutes later, he replied, "Good." Then another message appeared. They never deserved her anyway. That wasn't the only message. More arrived throughout the day. Former neighbors, old family friends, teachers, people who remembered Mia, people who remembered how excited she became whenever she learned something new. Many of them were angry. Not at me, at my parents. Then something unexpected happened. A local community group shared photos from the party. Someone had posted pictures and called it the best family New Year's celebration they had ever seen. The comments exploded. Parents wanted ideas. Teachers praised the creativity. People talked about encouraging curious children. The post spread far beyond our circle. And suddenly everyone was talking about the little girl who loved science. The little girl my father had called weird. That's when panic truly set in for my parents. Not because they felt guilty, because they felt exposed. 2 days later, my mother called again. This time I answered. The moment I picked up, She launched into a speech. Your father is devastated. I stayed silent. She continued. She said people were asking questions, that our family was being judged, that I had embarrassed everyone, that I was making them look cruel. I listened until she finally stopped talking. Then I spoke. No one made you look cruel. Silence. You did that yourselves. Her breathing changed. I could hear anger building. You don't understand. No, I interrupted. You don't understand. For the first time in my life, I didn't soften my words. You don't get to exclude an 8-year-old child because she doesn't fit your image and then complain when people find out. Silence. Heavy silence. Then she asked something that revealed everything. Does Mia even miss us? The question hit me unexpectedly, because I suddenly realized why she was asking. Not because she cared, because she was afraid. Afraid of the answer. And the answer was painful. Mia hadn't mentioned them once. Not once. No tears. No questions. No sadness. Nothing. I told my mother the truth, and when she heard it, she went completely quiet. A few seconds later, I ended the call. I honestly believed that was the end. I thought the message had finally been delivered. I thought they would back off. I thought wrong. A week later, while I was grocery shopping, Daniel called. The moment I heard his voice, I knew something had happened. Claire, he said carefully, your father is here. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What do you mean he's there? There was a pause. Then Daniel said words that would change everything. He showed up at the house, and he's trying to get inside. The parking lot around the grocery store suddenly felt very far away. I gripped the shopping cart so hard my knuckles turned white. What do you mean he's trying to get inside? Daniel exhaled slowly. He started ringing the doorbell. Then he walked around the house, looking through the windows. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It wasn't normal behavior. It wasn't concerned grandfather behavior. It was something else. Something desperate. Something angry. Daniel continued. Thankfully, Mia isn't here. She's still at Ava's house. Relief washed through me. At least Mia wasn't witnessing any of this. I asked what happened next. Daniel told me my father eventually spotted him through one of the front windows. Then he started yelling, demanding to be let inside, demanding to see Mia, demanding to speak to me. Daniel's cousins happened to be there helping move some storage bins from the garage. One of them opened the door just enough to tell my father he needed to leave. Instead of leaving, my father tried to push his way inside. When Daniel stepped between them, my father completely lost control. According to Daniel, he shouted loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. He accused me of poisoning Mia against him. Accused me of turning my daughter into a social outcast. Accused me of destroying the family. Then came the worst part. The words Daniel repeated so carefully that I knew they had hurt even him. He said, "You're turning her into a freak." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Not because I was shocked, because I wasn't. Deep down, I think I had always known that was how he saw her. The New Year's invitation had simply exposed it. Eventually he left, but not before making sure everyone nearby heard his version of the story. When I got home later that afternoon, Daniel wrapped his arms around me. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. Something fundamental had broken. Not just the relationship. The illusion. The illusion that this was all one big misunderstanding. The illusion that my parents simply needed time. The illusion that reconciliation was still possible. 2 days later, things got worse. Much worse. My phone rang from a blocked number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Something told me not to. The woman on the other end introduced herself. She was calling from Child Protective Services. I actually laughed at first, because I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Then she started explaining. An anonymous complaint had been filed. Someone claimed that Daniel and I were exposing children to unsafe activities. Someone claimed Mia was being encouraged to engage in strange behavior. Someone suggested our home environment was unhealthy. The accusations were so ridiculous they sounded fictional. For several seconds, I genuinely thought I was being pranked. The agent sounded almost uncomfortable. "We're required to investigate," she explained. "We don't currently have concerns, but protocol requires a follow-up visit." After I hung up, I sat perfectly still. Not angry, not crying, just thinking. Because there was only one question. Who The answer arrived almost immediately. My parents. Rachel. Or both. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. The timing was too perfect. The accusations were too specific. The language sounded exactly like the complaints they had always made about Mia. Too unusual. Too strange. Too different. The home visit happened 3 days later. The CPS investigator arrived with another worker. They were professional, polite, respectful. I welcomed them inside. I showed them everything. Mia's bookshelves, her science projects, her school records, her journals, the hundreds of pages filled with sketches, ideas, and experiments. They asked Mia questions. Simple question. What she liked, what she was learning, what she enjoyed doing with her family. Mia thought the entire thing was fascinating. At one point, she spent 10 minutes explaining a prototype she'd built using cardboard tubes and fishing line. The investigators smiled through the entire explanation. By the end of the visit, even they seemed embarrassed. One of them finally said it. She's clearly doing very well. The other nodded. We don't have any concerns. Then she hesitated, almost as if she wanted to say more. I'm sorry this happened. After they left, I stood alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet. Mia was upstairs. Daniel was at work. And for the first time since New Year's, I felt something cold settle inside me. Not grief. Not disappointment. Clarity. Because there was no misunderstanding anymore. No room for excuses. No benefit of the doubt. Someone had tried to use government agencies against us. Someone had attempted to weaponize a child protection system because they were angry they had been exposed. That wasn't family conflict. That was cruelty. Pure cruelty. That night, I sat down at my computer. I didn't rant. I didn't attack anyone. I simply told the truth. I posted a photo of one of Mia's latest inventions. A model she called a moon elevator. Then I wrote, after our New Year's party, someone filed a complaint against our family. Apparently a child who loves science, builds inventions, and asks questions was considered concerning. I explained the CPS visit. I explained the outcome. I explained that the investigators found exactly what we already knew. A happy child. A safe home. A family that loved her. Then I ended the post with one sentence. If you've ever been told your child is too much, too different, too loud, or too weird, don't make them smaller. Build a bigger world around them. I went to bed. The next morning, my phone exploded. Hundreds of messages. Parents, teachers, friends, strangers. Many shared their own stories. Children labeled difficult. Children labeled odd. Children labeled problematic simply because they were different. The response was overwhelming. A regional parenting blog contacted me 2 days later. The editor wanted permission to tell our story. I agreed under one condition. No names. No public identification. The article went live that weekend. The headline focused on a mother who chose acceptance over shame. It spread faster than I expected. Not viral, but powerful. People connected with it. Parents shared it. Educators discussed it. Support groups reposted it. And slowly, something remarkable happened. The narrative slipped out of my parents' control. For years, they had carefully managed appearances. Perfect family photos. Perfect holiday gatherings. Perfect public image. Now people were seeing something different. The truth. And the truth wasn't flattering. Messages started arriving from people who had known my family for decades. Several admitted they had witnessed moments they never fully understood before. One former neighbor wrote, I always wondered why Mia seemed nervous around family events. A retired teacher sent, I met your daughter once. She reminded me of gifted students I've taught. Children like her need encouragement, not criticism. Then came the message that really caught my attention. One of my mother's longtime friends reached out privately. Her words were brief, painfully brief. I always thought they were too hard on that little girl. That message sat in my mind for days, because it meant people had seen it. They had noticed. The comments, the judgment, the subtle exclusion. People had seen it and quietly looked away. Meanwhile, Rachel attempted damage control. She posted vague messages online, comments about people twisting stories, comments about attention-seeking, comments about family loyalty. Almost nobody responded. Almost nobody defended her. And that terrified them more than criticism ever could. Because silence meant people had already made up their minds. Meanwhile, Mia remained completely unaware of the growing fallout. She spent her afternoons building a roller coaster from pool noodles, teaching our cat hand signals, researching black holes, planning future inventions. She wasn't suffering. She was thriving. She was finally free from constantly trying to earn approval she should never have needed. And that freedom was exactly what my parents couldn't tolerate. Because the more she flourished without them, the less power they had. I thought things couldn't escalate further. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the article appeared, my father made a mistake that would destroy whatever remained of his credibility. And this time, there would be witnesses. 2 weeks after the article was published, the consequences finally started reaching my parents in ways they couldn't ignore. I wasn't the one telling people what happened anymore. The story had taken on a life of its own. Parents were discussing it. Teachers were sharing it. Community groups were reposting it. People weren't interested in gossip. They were interested in the larger message. The message that children shouldn't have to earn acceptance by fitting into someone else's idea of normal. That was what made my parents furious. They couldn't control the conversation. A former coworker of Rachel's messaged me one afternoon. Apparently, my father had shown up outside Rachel's office building. He had been pacing through the parking lot while yelling into his phone. People nearby overheard him complaining about me, about the article, about the attention, about how I was supposedly turning myself into a victim. One phrase kept coming up. She's acting like some kind of martyr. When I read that message, I actually laughed. A martyr? I wasn't asking for sympathy. I wasn't asking for praise. I was protecting my daughter. The fact that he couldn't understand the difference said everything. What happened next surprised me even more. People began quietly distancing themselves from my parents. Not because I told them to, because they made their own decisions. A few church friends stopped inviting them to social gatherings. Several neighbors became noticeably colder. My mother's volunteer coordinator reassigned her responsibilities at a local fundraiser. Nobody announced these decisions publicly. Nobody made a scene. But it happened. And my parents hated every second of it, because they couldn't fight it. You can't argue people into respecting you. You can't demand trust. You earn it. And they had spent years spending it faster than they realized. Then Rachel finally called me. For the first time in months. No greeting. No small talk. No attempt at kindness. She went straight to anger. You've gone too far. I sat quietly. She continued. You didn't have to destroy the entire family. The words were almost funny. Destroy the family? As if I were the one who had rejected a child. As if I were the one who had filed complaints. As if I were the one threatening people. I asked her a simple question. What exactly was the misunderstanding? Silence. A long silence. Then she started talking about reputation, about appearances, about how hard our parents had worked to build respect in the community. Not once did she mention Mia. Not once did she mention the New Year's rejection. Not once did she mention the pain they caused. That's when I finally understood. They weren't ashamed of what they had done. They were ashamed people knew. The entire conflict suddenly became crystal clear. I spoke calmly. If Dad had apologized, silence. If Mom had apologized, more silence. If either of them had shown 1 ounce of regret for excluding an 8-year-old child because she didn't fit their image, none of this would have happened. Rachel had no answer, because there wasn't one. A few seconds later, she hung up. 3 days after that, a letter arrived. Plain white envelope. No return address. No identifying information. The moment I saw the handwriting, I knew. My father. The block lettering. The carefully controlled strokes. The attempt to hide emotion behind neat lines. I had seen it my entire life. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Nothing more. The message was short. Very short. You've said enough. If you continue this, we will take action. You are not the only one capable of damaging a reputation. Think carefully about your next move. D. No apology. No accountability. No love. Just a threat. I stared at the page for several minutes. Oddly enough, I wasn't scared. A few months earlier, maybe I would have been. Not anymore. Because the letter revealed something important. He didn't want reconciliation. He wanted control. And he had finally realized he no longer had it. I took a photograph. Then I posted it. No caption. No explanation. Just the image. Just his words. The response was immediate. Messages poured in from people who had followed the story. Many were horrified. Others weren't surprised at all. That was somehow worse. People expected it. The threat felt completely consistent with everything that had happened before. One parent commented, "He really thinks she's the problem." Another wrote, "I hope that child never has to deal with him again." The conversation continued late into the night. Then, just before midnight, I received a message that stopped me cold. It came from Mrs. Gutierrez, my old neighbor, the woman who used to babysit Rachel and me when we were children. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Her message was simple. "Claire, I remember you sitting on the porch reading books while the other kids played. I kept reading. You were always curious." Another line. "You were always asking questions." Then came the sentence that made my eyes fill with tears. "I'm proud you're protecting your daughter the way nobody protected you." I read that sentence over and over, because suddenly everything connected. Mia wasn't the first child in this family to be treated like she was different. I was. The same criticism, the same pressure, the same message. Be quieter. Be easier. Be normal. Fit in. Don't make people uncomfortable. I'd spent years convincing myself those memories weren't important. Years telling myself things weren't that bad. Years excusing behavior that should never have been excused. But Mrs. Gutierrez remembered. She remembered because it had been real. And now I was watching the exact same pattern repeat itself with Mia. Except this time, it stopped. With me? The next morning I blocked every number connected to my parents. My mother's. My father's. Rachel's. Every one of them. Not out of anger. Out of peace. The war was over. Because I finally understood something. You don't win against people like that by convincing them. You don't win by arguing. You don't win by waiting for accountability. You win by refusing to hand them your life anymore. I archived the threatening letter, stored screenshots, saved records. Then I closed the folder. For good. That afternoon I picked Mia up and took her to her favorite art supply store. She spent nearly an hour choosing materials for her newest invention. Something involving marshmallows, springs, and what she described as controlled snack propulsion. I still don't completely understand it. Afterward, we ate lunch at her favorite diner. Halfway through her pancakes, I looked at her and smiled. "I think we should start a tradition." She looked up. "What kind of tradition?" "The kind where we celebrate weird kids." Her eyes immediately lit up. "Weird kids are the best kids." I laughed. "Exactly." She grinned. Then she launched into an enthusiastic explanation about building a machine that could automatically sort rocks by color. I listened. Really listened. And while she talked, I realized something beautiful. My parents lost. Not because their reputation suffered. Not because people judged them. Not because they were exposed. They lost because Mia was happy. She was confident. She was curious. She was loved. She wasn't shrinking herself anymore. And neither was I. The cycle ended with us. The silence. The guilt. The conditional love. The constant pressure to fit someone else's idea of acceptable. All of it ended right there in that diner booth. As Mia sketched another impossible invention on a paper napkin. As sunlight streamed through the window. As a new year stretched out in front of us. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of us was trying to belong. We already did. Exactly as we were.